So is President Zelensky prepared to make concessions? Here with us now is Jamil Jaffer. He's the founder of the George Mason University Cyber and Tech Center and National Security Institute founder. Nice to see you, Jamil.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
So you just heard that soundbite that Jackie just played where Zelensky is calling Putin a man of war. And we've seen these fresh attacks from Russia as well yesterday morning, killing, injuring, knocking out power and heat. What are you thinking? I mean, are they any closer?
Well, Anna, that's exactly the question. It looks like there's a deal to be had here. The U.S. laid out a 20-point peace plan that had some elements the Russians were looking for. We've now negotiated with Ukraine. Ukraine's come back with its perspective. The challenge, of course, is that Vladimir Putin continues to put the pressure on and continues to conduct attacks on civilians in ways that President Trump has indicated to him clearly are not helpful. And so the question now is, what is President Trump going to do about the fact that Vladimir Putin appears to not want peace? Is he going to be able to put the kind of pressure it's going to take on Vladimir Putin come to the table? That's the question. That's the sort of the million-dollar question nobody really knows the answer to.
Right, and there continues to be a debate here in this country about how much support, financial support especially, the United States should be giving Ukraine. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing that country is pledging this $2.5 billion loan now to help Ukraine recover and rebuild, notably not for more weapons here. But what does this kind of support tell you about where the war stands right now and potentially what Americans may be asked to do?
Well, look, it does appear that there is a opportunity for Ukraine now to rebuild with this loan from Canada, that there is an opportunity here to see what a scenario for Ukraine might look like if there is peace. The problem, of course, is there's no way to get to the peace talks or to even make that deal happen or get to rebuilding if the war doesn't end. And the war ending requires two parties to both come to the table and make a deal. Vladimir Putin, again, has seemed unwilling or unable or not ready to come to the table. And the question is, how do we get him to the table? That might require the president and the United States to put more pressure on Ukraine. That might require more weapons, a thing that the president has indicated he is not prepared to do. So the question is, how do you get there if Vladimir Putin isn't willing to come to the table?
Yeah, especially when he's being called a man of war. He's been called a lot of other things like a butcher and a killer. And when you don't care about your own men dying, you're a tough force to be reckoned with. Zelensky stated a lot can be decided before the new year as he heads into today's meeting. So as we look ahead, what do you think is actually going to come from these discussions there at Mar-a-Lago face-to-face between Trump and Zelensky?
Well, look, one of the things that Zelensky has indicated he really wants out of this meeting are these security guarantees. But if you remember, security guarantees are exactly what caused that blow up in the Oval Office the last time he had a meeting with President Trump on these issues. So the question is, how hard does Zelensky press for those guarantees? How willing is the president to give those now that we're closer to a peace deal than we've ever been before? And at the end of the day, what can the two of them agree on to force Russia to the table to get Russia into a deal? It's not clear there's real trade space here because it's not clear what Vladimir Putin wants other than more of Ukraine, which Zelensky isn't willing to give. And it's not clear the president's going to put the pressure on Ukraine to do that, nor should he, nor will Ukraine give in. And so, it's hard to see what a real deal looks like without Putin president and without Putin ready to make a deal. And so at the end of the day, if the most successful outcome of this would be for the president of the United States to say, we will do whatever it takes to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to get to the table. The problem is the president hasn't yet been there. We'll see if that happens over this weekend. I kind of doubt it, though.
Yeah, we were just showing our viewers a full screen with the concessions that Zelensky may potentially have to make. And with Trump there in the video of them in the Oval Office with that blow up and him wagging his finger at him. And what he was saying was, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. We'll see if he has any more cards. At least he's got Canada, the financial loan that Carney just announced yesterday. And they seem to have more support from Europe even now as well. If we can, let's move on to the tensions between the United States and Venezuela. A lot of foreign policy news we're tracking here. A Venezuela-linked tanker is still being chased by U.S. authorities in Caribbean waters right now and refusing to let Coast Guard crews on board. And all of this comes, Jamil, as specialized teams are moving in to a possible forced seizure there. What kind of impact could this have on the broader escalation between these two countries?
Well, look, this wouldn't be the first tanker that we've seized or we've boarded it to take the oil that we claim is involved in trafficking between Iran, Venezuela, other nations that are sanctioned by the United States. So this appears to continue to be part of an effort to put pressure on Nicolas Maduro to leave office. The president has been clear he doesn't want him in power there. He will do what it takes to get him out. We've seen a large military buildup of the United States has made there in the Caribbean, including a carrier strike group. And so we'll see if, in fact, this pressure continues to rise on Maduro, whether he, in fact, leaves office. But at the end of the day, if that doesn't happen, the U.S. will continue to seize these tankers and continue to put pressure on the Venezuelan economy and, frankly, earn revenue for the United States from these seizures based on the sale of Venezuelan oil to Iran and other illicit nations.
Yeah, other bad actors. And I think this story, since it's been in the headlines, a lot of Americans are realizing just how much oil, just how many oil reserves are there in Venezuela. And it makes you just kind of realize what kind of a leader Maduro is when so many people living in Venezuela are living in squalor. And you can see why many are pushing for regime change. We know where that's gotten us in the past sometimes, though, when we try to push for that. If we can, we're going to switch gears once again, talking more foreign policy, because tomorrow's meeting we've got between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump also happening at Mar-a-Lago. And Iran's president has just said this: we are in a full-scale war with the United States, Israel, and Europe. They don't want our country to remain stable. So that's what Iran is saying. What does this tell you about the state of relations in the region, especially with recent U.S. involvement?
Well, look, Iran's obviously been a long time problem in the Middle East. They've supported groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're a nation whose people are frankly, peaceful and actually interested in more things like the United States and Western values. The problem, of course, you have a Iranian government that doesn't represent their people, that's been in power since the late 1970s, that is inveterately opposed to the United States, to Israel, to our allies in the Middle East, opposed by all of our allies in the region as well. And so the question becomes, how do you get the Iranian regime to the right place, or get the Iranian people to put a regime in place that is more reflective of their own values? And, the U.S. has put a lot of pressure. Israel's put a lot of pressure on Iran in the last few years, since the October 7th war, with the dismantling of Hezbollah, with the dismantling of Hamas and the like, and, of course, with the U.S. attacks Operation Midnight Hammer against the Iranian nuclear program. So if Iran's at war with the United States, they can say so. But if they're at war, the war's not going very well for them, to be honest with you, Anna.
Gotcha. All right, Jamil, Jaffer, thanks for weighing in.